Welcome to Hoosier Gameday. It's been a while since we last spoke at the end of the football season, but we're towards the back end of the basketball season. It's the women's team nearing the Big Ten tournament and the men's team fighting for their NCAA tournament life. We've got some great experts to give you all the insight you need as we get towards the business end of the season. We kick things off with the game last night against Maryland. Indiana winning that one 74-64. For all the analysis, I'm going to toss it over across my studio to my good friend Max Rezek-Te Winkle, who has some expert guests to break it all down.
Thanks, Jack. I am joined by Zak Ibrahim and Tyler Tachman. Zak, our own Hoosier Network, and then guest from inside the hall. Thanks so much for joining us, gentlemen. So last night, Indiana basketball, after that 5-game skid, got back on track with that win against Maryland. I guess just first impressions, what did you like, and what did they do differently kind of coming off that 5-game skid? Tyler, we'll start with you.
To me, it was the offense. The offense was actually fun to watch. It had flow, it had rhythm, and that's something that we haven't really seen the last couple of games. I mean, in the Ohio State game, it just felt very dull. There wasn't much movement, a lot of standing around, and I give credit to Xavier Johnson for the way that Indiana's offense has turned around against Maryland, and that he was doing everything a good point guard was supposed to do in terms of creating for other guys, hitting three-pointers, making plays for himself as well. And that's the key for Indiana in my eyes is getting the offense to at least be average, because their defense is going to give them a chance in most games. If their offense can at least be average or better than average, then they're going to have a good chance down the stretch.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of that average scoring mark. We talked a little bit earlier in this week, Zach, on the podcast about how in this last stretch they haven't been even scoring 1 point per possession. What did they do differently? And I mean, once again, we saw this Indiana team going back to balancing the scoring a little bit out, and it wasn't all Trayce Jackson-Davis. What did you think about that, Zach?
I thought they got a relatively balanced scoring effort from everybody, but obviously Xavier Johnson, that was the performance that stuck out. He sparked the second half, and there's no question about it. He was in foul trouble in the first half and then completely rebounded in the second half and really took his team and just commanded the offense. And I think what can't go understated has been the play of Race Thompson lately.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's really come into his own, and Trayce Jackson-Davis struggled, but Race Thompson filled into that 1A role. That's what Mike Woodson told him in the post, that he was going to be their go-to scorer, and he really showed it off. The jump hook is nice, and the offense just really looked different. They shot 60% from the field, the highest they've shot all season.
All right, hot take time. Has Race Thompson been better than Trayce Jackson-Davis in this past stretch?
I think recently he has been. I mean, if you're looking at the entire season as a whole, I think you'd probably still deviate towards Trayce Jackson-Davis. But I think what's so great about that question is Indiana doesn't have to pick between those two. They can have both of them. So we have a game like against Maryland where maybe Trayce Jackson-Davis is struggling a little bit. You have Race Thompson pick him up. Maybe against Minnesota, it's vice versa. So it's almost having that kind of two-headed monster inside where one guy can pick up the slack, or if they're both going, Indiana can really try to work that inside-out game if guys are hitting from the outside.
All right, Zach, what you think?
I think you could say after the first Ohio State game, which was one of Trayce's best, that Race has simply been more consistent. And Trayce did everything that he could against Wisconsin. That was a game where he went toe-to-toe with Johnny Davis. They both put up 30. Ultimately, Wisconsin came out with that victory. But I think Race Thompson's been more consistent. And he's been a guy that hasn't commanded a double team yet this season, whereas Trayce has. Teams are trying to take Jackson Davis away. That leaves Race Thompson one-on-one, and he likes those matchups.
All right, and I think the question on everyone's mind, tournament resume. On Thursday evening, Oregon got a fantastic win against UCLA. They're another team that is on the bubble. But Indiana also kept pace, getting back in the win column. What do you think they need to do in this final stretch? They have Minnesota, and then at home against Rutgers for senior night, and then Mackey. And then you have the Big Ten tournament. I guess, Zach, what do you think they need to do to feel comfortable going into the Big Ten tournament about their NCAA tournament resume?
I think you have to beat the teams that you'll be favored against, and that's going to be Minnesota and Rutgers at home. Minnesota's a team they've already taken care of, and it's a team that Trayce Jackson-Davis specifically in his career at IU has played really well against. So that's a good bounce-back effort for him possibly. And then Rutgers is a team that has played different on the road in the Big Ten. That's a team that has come up with some big upsets. So Indiana has to be wary of that, but I still believe they'll be favored in that game. And you can't count out, having at least a good showing at Mackey if you're able to beat Minnesota and Rutgers. That's just a good tournament resume builder. And then obviously the Big Ten tournament will be its own monster. But Indiana, they control their own destiny.
All right, Tyler. So Zach just gave us that situation where they win against Minnesota and Rutgers, beat the teams they need to beat, then have a good showing against Purdue. What happens if they lose one of these next 2 games and then lose at Mackey? What do they need to do in the Big Ten tournament to keep their tournament hopes alive?
I think for as many as they lose in this next 2-game stretch is they'll have to make that up in the Big Ten tournament. So if you lose to Rutgers or if you lose to Minnesota, then you're most likely going to have to win at least one, probably 2 games, and knock off one of those top 4 seeds in the Big Ten tournament to be able to get that loss back. I think we're kind of back to where we've been the last few years with Indiana basketball, and that it's going to be a lot of anxiety probably going up to the last game, a lot of nail biting in the Big Ten tournament. So it seemed like a couple weeks ago Indiana was going to kind of be comfortably in, and here we are back again on the bubble.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much to Zach and Tyler. Don't worry, we got a little bit more panel talk coming up later. We're going to be talking IU women's basketball, but for now, we mentioned that play by Xavier Johnson. Our man Zion Brown is at the board. He's going to take a deeper dive into his play against Maryland.
Xavier Johnson's play against Maryland last night was huge for the Hoosiers to get out of their losing streak. We saw what he did from the field, going perfect from the field, but what really made his night special was the downhill penetration he was able to get all night against Maryland's defense. Let's take a look at it. So right here, he gets the mismatch, he sees the mismatch, and he's going to drive downhill. And when you stop it right there, you can already see Trayce Jackson-Davis's defender is stopped, and he doesn't know what to do. Does he help the drive, or does he help on Trayce Jackson-Davis? That leaves IU's best scorer wide open, and you can see it leads to an easy bucket. Great play from Xavier Johnson. We have more of the same here with him getting down the lane. This time, you see him drive, and you see him get past his man. You've got a smaller guy on him right there, and then in the opposite corner, you have Indiana's best shooter on the floor. So you can't really help off of him all that much, and they can't get in front of Xavier Johnson, so it leads to an easy layup for Xavier Johnson. Great play overall from him. We have another play, gets past the screen. Now he has a big on him, who obviously he's much faster than, so he has to step on the big. And look, now this guy that's on Parker Stewart is cheating down on Parker Stewart. You know what that leads to? Open shots for Parker Stewart. Wide open in the corner, IU's best shooter. That's easy money for him. So another great play by Xavier Johnson. This is just great passing, great poise to get it right on target to Trayce Jackson-Davis. And here we have another play. Watch this one. This one is really interesting to me. He gets it right here. Look at all the defenders on Maryland, how they're focused in on Xavier Johnson. They're all looking at him. They're all ready to pounce. You can even see it more there. And wide open, Race Thompson. That's just too easy for Xavier Johnson. And this is just in a flow, in a rhythm, steps in to the easy bucket. Xavier Johnson's play has always been huge for this Indiana team, whether he's playing poorly or whether he's playing bad. Race Thompson talked about it, how he kind of steers the train for IU. Race Thompson talked about that last night. And Xavier Johnson has done a great job. What we didn't even show is how often he gets to the free throw line. He has a higher free throw rate than any other starting point guard in the Big Ten. And when he hits 76% of his free throws, that is a huge advantage for Indiana. So this downhill play, this penetration, even when Xavier Johnson's jump shot is not falling, proves that he is one of the most important and most valuable offensive players on this Indiana team.
Some great analysis there from Zion Brown. Make sure to follow him on Twitter for all the analysis you need all season long as we get towards the tournament time for both teams. Speaking of tournaments, it's the Big Ten tournament right around the corner for the women's team. Let's go back over to Max with some more experts to break that down.
Thanks, Jack. Today, joined by Carlo Barone, Kevin Vera of the Hoosier Network, and then Evan Gerike of the Associated Press. How about that? So we're going to talk about IU women's basketball. And as of late, kind of struggling to get those wins against Iowa. Caitlin Clark, one of the best players in the nation in women's basketball. But it was Monica Czinano who was really the big struggle for IU women's basketball. Kind of, what was their issue? I'll start with Carlo. What was their issue with kind of defending her down low?
Well, they gave Mackenzie Holmes a lot of minutes that she needed because she just came back. And to be honest, she's not fully healthy yet. And they had problems in the low post, getting rebounds and, stopping who you said. Like, they just could not defend down low, and they got out-rebounded both games, and they lost both games as a result.
Yeah, Kevin, I mean, what did you kind of notice with the return of Mackenzie Holmes down low? Alexa Gulbe really stepped up in her absence, but now that they had her back and they didn't quite get that boost that they needed to get over the hump of Iowa.
Well, the problem with both games in Iowa is that because Caitlin Clark is, in my opinion, the best player in the country, because she was in that game, they had to, limit the perimeter shooting, leaving down low wide open. So that's why, they gave up 96 points in the first game, and, they played a little bit better in the second game, but it's just really, I think the defensive plan going into Iowa was a little bit tough, especially with no McKenzie.
Yeah, and then the guards for Indiana had their hands full guarding Caitlin Clark. How do you feel they did against Caitlin Clark? And then, as Kevin mentioned, how do you think that impacted the rest of their game down low?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they did an admirable job defending her, especially because she is as good as she is, especially that first game. Only 2 points in the first half. If you tell the average IU fan that they held Caitlin Clark to 2 points in the first half, they thought Indiana would be doing great. Still getting blown out in the first half of that first game at home. But they did a really good job of kind of shutting her down. The issue was they spent so much time focusing on her that she had all these shooters around her that she could dish out to and hit great shots. She had, to go along with those 2 points, she had 7 assists, 4 of them just to Monica Sanano down low, who was just so powerful, and Indiana really had nothing to do to stop them.
Yeah, and Iowa got out to a big lead early on, but Indiana did a fantastic job trying to crawl back into that. And then they just couldn't get to the finish line, and you saw how much that impacted Allie Patberg in senior night at Assembly. What has she meant to this program?
I mean, if there's anyone from women's basketball history you'd want to build a statue of, Allie Patberg is up there. Obviously, you got Tyra Buss, all-time leading scorer, but Patberg has just meant so much to this program over the 5 years she's already been here, and she really has seen such growth during her time. She was here when they won the WNIT, and now she's almost here leading this team to a potentially an Elite 8 run last year, maybe even farther this year if everything clicks together. She really is an Indiana Hoosier through and through.
Yeah, so moving on to their opponent tonight, Maryland is right in front of them in the Big Ten standings after those 2 losses to Iowa. What do they need to do this evening against Maryland? And if they do beat them, they leapfrog them in the Big Ten standings. Carlos, start with you.
Well, they already beat Maryland earlier this year, and that was their first win against Maryland ever in program history. So beating them 2 times in a row is going to be hard. But regardless, like you said, if they get the win, they do move up into that 4th spot and get an extra bye in the tournament, which would be huge. So they have a big game tonight. But you're going to have to see Mackenzie Holmes step up. At some point, she's going to have to start playing well if this team wants to be where they were last year.
Yeah, and Kevin Vera, I can't help but notice this just popped in my head while he was talking. He looked like the Godfather with all these.
I know the
wonderful
striped
suit. Let's go to the Godfather. What does this win do, propelling them into the Big Ten tournament?
Well, I think the key for this game is Nicole Cardano-Hillary. Mm-hmm. The past couple games, she's had, she hasn't been quite herself. In the first game against Iowa, she had a handful of turnovers. But now I think you really got to play through the ball with her because, in my opinion, yes, Mackenzie's one of the best players in the country. Yes, Alexa has improved throughout the season. But I think the heart of this team is Nicole. And we've seen that last year with the Elite 8 run. So really, I just expect her to have a good game offensively and, of course, defensively.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much to Carlo Barone, Kevin the Godfather, Vera, and Evan Gerike. That's going to do it for us on our women's basketball panel.
Great analysis as always from the guys. That's going to do it for our Hoosier Game Day show here today. I've been Jack Edwards. Make sure to follow the Hoosier Network for all your updates for tonight's game against Maryland, as well as all tournament season long as we get towards the end of the season. We'll catch you next time.